So just real briefly, who we are. Bluelock was started in 2006 by a group of data center veterans. We did things the traditional way. We built space, added power, cooling. Eventually, over time, we got into managed services when people want us to actually come in and run their IT infrastructure for them so they could focus on the application or the business. We saw that at that time, there were a whole lot of problems that people came to us that we couldn't solve. And they weren't because there was a lack of smart people where we were. It was really the technology. The way of doing things of traditional servers, traditional networking just would not address the concerns that people have. The business model that we created is called infrastructure as a service. And if you're familiar with the concept of software as a service, just literally take the word software out and put in infrastructure. And take all the values everybody has that they've seen in the software as a service or even the ASP model, and then apply it to all the infrastructure that normally supports that model. What a lot of people don't know is traditionally, software as a service applications were really good about giving you, if you had 5 users or 500 users, you literally turn a dial, they would charge you a license fee and a service fee, you'd go up. If those users ran heavy reports or did whatever, literally the dials would work. But on the back end, their infrastructure was a static capital cost. So they'd spend $100,000, maybe $1 million, maybe $30 million worth of infrastructure, and then everything else about their business was this dynamic thing that they tried to sell their end users. But infrastructure-wise, didn't work that way. So we came up with this list of 10 things. I'll talk about them real quick that we couldn't solve and how we've solved them for real customers, because I think that whether it's Bluelock or someone else you'd work with from a cloud standpoint, these are the things you can do now. And I would say in terms of your applications, you should set that as the bar. If you've got an application environment or a business you want to run, those are the things you should be able to do, not alternatives, but you should set that expectation. We had to build a platform to do this, and we call it virtual cloud computing. There's a cloud taxonomy diagram out there. One of the guys at Oracle wrote it. It's a great picture, and it shows this cloud in the middle, and then it's got 20 different categories of what cloud is. So instead of trying to replicate that in 5 minutes or less, I'd say go do a Google search on that. We fit into more of a category what I'd call hosting as a service or platform as a service. We built the whole thing on top of VMware, so it's a virtual infrastructure. We've got the VMware folks over there giving us props for that. But more importantly, here's some of the problems that we solved. So one of the biggest issues was capacity on demand, and what we saw a lot were either the eBay model or the Taj Mahal model. So someone, maybe a startup company with a great idea, but no resources, no investors, trying to do it out of their garage. They knew they had to have some kind of infrastructure to host this application. So they would go out to eBay, they'd get a router, a switch, a firewall, maybe a used Dell server, they'd pack it all together. And it turns out that was the greatest idea in the world, but they were out of business in 3 days because when everybody tried it or when they got slash-dotted, they were gone, right? So that didn't work. And then we had the Taj Mahal model where someone got a hold of, a vendor rep got a hold of somebody and said, hey, look at this brochure. Your data center should look like this. And so they literally said, well, we'll take one of everything in the picture, and then we're going to pay you $300,000 in professional services to hook it all together. And they got exactly what they asked for, but they spent 50% of that investor capital that they received in building the platform. And as anybody that's done a startup knows, the users usually come a lot slower than you predict. So for 2 years, you sit there and depreciate those assets, and again, by that time, you're probably out of business. So capacity on demand, you look at Amazon EC2, you look at what we do. Literally, you pay for what you need when you need it, and if you need more, the cloud just puts it in there. That's part of the magic. Pay for what you use. Capacity on demand is kind of how the infrastructure side of that works, which is great. You get more processing power, more storage, more CPU when you need it. But the big thing a lot of people forget is software licensing. So it's really cool that VMware can make our servers kind of swell and grow and shrink as we need it. But if Microsoft or Oracle still wants to charge you for 40 Oracle instances, you're dead. Capital cost reduction, again, if you have an easy entry point like that, you start small, you grow big. The idea of writing a $100,000 check or a $500,000 check goes away. Rapid provisioning, if anybody's ever tried any of this stuff, you can usually get a server right now. In the old days, it used to be you call CDW, you get a quote back, you go to purchasing, you go through all this rigmarole. There's some folks here today that I've talked to at big companies who are having to expense their cloud infrastructure on their credit card and turn it in on an expense report, not because it's not approved, but because the organization purchasing has no way to figure out how to charge for it. Disaster recovery, again, it's a lot easier. It's included now in a lot of cloud providers. You assume they've got the spare servers. They build all that architecture, so the idea of you creating a cluster has gone away. And then one difference that we offer, you've got full service versus what we call utility computing. So Amazon today, you're on your own, but you can get as much capacity as you need if you know how to architect it. But there are other providers out there that if you are not an infrastructure architect, you can get the whole thing from a full service standpoint. That's 5 minutes.
Great.